Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the manager. How you doing today, sir?
Get out of everyone's ears.
What?
Yeah, that was nothing. I'm doing better. We took a week off to give my voice a break, and I think it's recovered. We'll see.
That's good. Yeah. I'm glad you're sounding better. And I appreciate everyone's patience for us taking that week off. I hope everyone enjoyed the last second content that we threw out there for you. Thanks to my wife Elise for tolerating doing that with me.
I sure enjoyed it. So
seem to enjoy it. Yeah. Full disclosure on that. The reason why the episode came out so late in the day was because I sent it to Matt after I finished editing it together and was basically like, Matt, is this anything? Please just listen and tell me if this is good. Because like I thought it was funny, but it's my wife. I love her. So I don't have a clear perspective on her. So Matt gave it the go ahead, and so we dropped it.
You can all thank me ultimately, because
I think so.
I think Scott was probably not going to post it, and I had to be like, "This is delightful." Post it.
I don't know if I was not going to. I just was like, I had no idea if it was like, it was one of those things where I had a loose kernel of an idea, sat down with it, and was like, I don't know if this is going to be entertaining to anyone but me specifically. But it was, so that's good.
It was.
If you want more of that, my wife and I have hundreds of hours of us basically doing that over on our other show that has been on a hiatus for a while now. You can just go to a podcatcher and search What You Say, and you'll find us. That's where we talk about the OC, but on that same feed is our old episodes talking about different movies and stuff.
Yes, they are very cute.
But anyway, this week on this show, we are finally continuing with part 7 of our series covering Stephen King's The Shining. We're talking about chapters 38 through 45 as Dick frantically heads back to the Overlook to answer Danny's call for help. All hell officially breaks loose. Jack not only jumps off the wagon, but sets it on fire and cackles gleefully as it burns to the ground. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading?
So we move from Jack is losing it to Jack has lost it, I think. Also, it's a fun change of pace to jump over and see what Dick is doing. I've always enjoyed this about Stephen King, that he really understands pacing and tension. And, you know, in the hands of any other author, when we jump away from Dick, I would be when we jump away to Dick, I would be afraid that it's like, oh no, I want to get back to what's going on at the Overlook. But like, it seems like a really natural break point to manipulate the tension in a specific way where you don't feel annoyed about it. Because I certainly didn't feel annoyed about it, and just really enjoyed Dick Hallorann as a character also, and seeing the world from his perspective. It's very different from any of our other 3 characters in the story.
For sure. And there's a lot I want to talk about that with you this week.
And then of course we have our extremely fun, Jack kind of utterly losing it in the bar or the ballroom or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The California, the Colorado lounge. I mean, I don't know why I said California.
Man, it's interesting because I think in a lot of ways, this week's set of chapters is kind of just table setting for our climax that's coming rather rapidly upon us. But then, of course, we have, I think, the most important moment of the book so far, which is Jack, falling off the wagon, which is the most significant event that's happened to him so far. Is this event, this moment where he finally walks across that line. And so it is interesting in a lot of ways. We're setting up pieces. We're really escalating it to that final conflict, but we're not actually beginning the conflict yet. So there's a lot of like in these chapters, especially, there's a lot of just like wait and see. And you're absolutely right. It's tense. King holds attention very well, but it's just a lot of. But then at the same time, we also have the most important moment ever, which is what happens with Jack.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's great stuff.
It really is. Let's get into it, shall we?
Okay.
We've waited 2 weeks for this. Let's do it. All right, chapter 38, Florida. And as you mentioned in the introduction, this is the first time in hundreds of pages we are going to leave the Torrances behind and start down in sunny Florida with our old friend Dick Halloran. I agree with you. This is such a wonderful change of pace and a wonderful perspective. And there is a part of you that wonders, I think we talked about this kind of when we had them go down and visit Sidewinder and see the people down there. There's part of you that wonders if the book would have felt more isolated and cut off, if that would have gotten us into the heads of the characters more, if it didn't allow us to cut away to them, to anyone else. And we do get kind of a reprieve from the tension a little bit in the first moments that we join up with Dick here. I think King then uses that reprieve remarkably effectively to then super ratchet up the tension. But I don't know, what do you think? Do you think I know you enjoyed this, but do we lose some of the isolation by cutting away?
Well, I mean, I could see a case for that, but the way I feel is that it's creating a contrast. Because what the story has done thus far is we sort of have had a circle which started out wide and open, and then has constricted gradually to the point where now our characters are just inside of a building all the time. They don't even go outside to play in the snow. The whole universe of the story has become the interior of the hotel. And by sort of jarringly snapping over to Dick Halloran, happily walking through the sunny streets of Florida with a, big basket full of citrus fruits, it's a huge contrast, which then when we go back to the Overlook, it feels even more dismal because you're contrasting it to Florida. So I think there's there's a reason he chooses Florida and not like Maine.
Yeah.
As the location that Dick has gone to. I think it's because it creates this contrast.
No, I think you're right. I think you're totally right there. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I really love about this whole part is it is 5 pages into this chapter before we see Danny's cry for help reach Dick. And so we get to spend 5 pages with him just kind of living his life. He's walking around in Florida. He's joking around with the owner of the vegetable mart. We do get to see him kind of muse about age and life. And I love this section here when he's talking about hanging out with the vegetable mart guy. He says, but seeing him mattered. Every time it mattered now because they weren't young anymore. In the last few days, it seemed he was thinking of that a very great deal. Not so young anymore. When you got up near 60 years old, or say the truth and save a lie past it, you had to start thinking about stepping out. You could go any time, and that had been on his mind this week, not in a heavy way, but as a fact. Dying was a part of living. You had to keep tuning into that if you expect to be a whole person. And if the fact of your own death was hard to understand, at least it wasn't impossible to accept. And this is really great setup, I think, because impending death and this feeling of Dick's impending death is kind of the through line through his part of this week's reading, right? Like this constant feeling of, it's almost time for me to be stepping out, and how that escalates when he gets this call to kind of go to what could possibly be his doom to help out the Torrances.
Yeah, this is a textbook example of King's technique of foreshadowing, of basically telling you, using the conceit of magic to step into the story and say, hey, this character, he gets magical premonitions and he's getting a magical premonition that he's going to die, as a way of sort of telling us this character's going to die.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of, what's the word? I guess bittersweet. I was going to say heartwarming. I think bittersweet is probably more accurate, just to kind of see Dick's like accepting attitude of this whole thing. Like, it's not that he is thrilled about it, but as we're going to see, as we go through this bit, there's just a lot of nobility to Dick's overall reaction to his circumstances.
Definitely. I mean, this idea that you're going to what you feel more than anyone else would feel is your doom, and yet you choose to go anyway, I think is really important, key to his character. And that's what the Shining allows King to do in this situation is, we can say that it's not just a feeling, it's a premonition, that he goes and updates his will days before Danny calls out to him for help. It's great.
Yeah, the will part and the fact that he has the will in his coat pocket, I thought
Hmm.
was just excellent, just great stuff.
It's one of those things that is like delightfully um obvious in
Yeah,
like a perfect King way. That it's like, you know, we last week talked about Jordan Peele's Nope, which is a movie we both loved very, very much, and this is a movie with like 12 different layers going on, and the meaning of what we think Peele's trying to do here or trying to wrestle with is like hidden under multiple layers all building on top of each other. And it's not like King can't do that, and he does do that with some things, but I will never stop being just like amazed by how incredibly simple and obvious King is sometimes, and
yeah,
it manages to still be effective and entertaining and great. But when he wants to be obvious, when he wants you to get what he's going for, he makes it very, very clear.
yeah, yeah. What does the will in the coat pocket symbolize? It's not a mystery.
Gee, I don't know.
Yeah.
Immortality, that's what it
Oh
is.
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So as Dick drives home from the market, Danny's psychic scream hits him with its full force, almost causing him to drive off the road. And we do this really interesting thing where when that happens, we don't see it all through Dick's perspective. We actually cut over to another character, another one who's on the road driving next to him. And I want to read this because I think it is also interesting and introducing a motif that I think we're going to be maybe a little bit more subtextually touching on throughout these chapters. It says the workman cut to the left, still laying on his horn, and roared around the drunkenly weaving limousine. He invited the driver of the limo to perform an illegal sex act on himself, to engage in oral congress with various rodents and birds. He articulated his own proposal that all persons of Negro blood return to their native continent. He expressed his sincere belief in the position that the limo driver's soul would occupy in the afterlife. He finished by saying that he believed he had met the limo driver's mother in New Orleans, in a New Orleans house of prostitution. Then he was out ahead and out of danger, and suddenly aware that he had wet his pants.
Good.
So, gosh, there's so much there, right? So the one thing I want to introduce here, and we can hit that beat over and over again, is how much I think King is never like, you know, we just talked about King's clarity and obviousness, but I think it's interesting the ways in which Dick's blackness is like paramount to the way he experiences the world, of course, and the way people experience him. But it's never kind of stated outright here. It's almost just like, I mean, we're in the perspective of a man who's 60 something years old, who's old and has experienced being a black man in this world for forever. So it has a kind of resigned acceptance to the way people view him. And we see kind of how that, you know, defines his experience just going through life. And of course we have this whole scene where with this random guy who just decides to say all black people should go back to Africa while being pissed off at this one guy for having a seizure while driving his car. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of interesting subtext there, but and then there's the bit Matt about he pisses himself.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, I found this scene to be overall actually pretty intense, even considering that I knew that, you know, Dick's going to make it to the Overlook. Just the idea of of locking up in a psychic seizure as you're on the freeway was really intense. But yeah, I mean I just think it's interesting, I guess, to step back, because I kept thinking this week in particular, and we're going to get to a more explicit kind of connection in a second, but this about how in this, you know, latter part of this decade in particular, King is really interested in the perspectives of black characters, and like you just said, how their blackness is actually, you know, part of their perspective on the world, and the way every interaction with other characters is influenced by it in some way.
Yeah.
And it's inescapable, and it's I mean, it even I think maybe this is what you were alluding to, but it even sort of crops up in Jack's perspective. Like the hotel is racist.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, I don't quite know what to make of that yet, but clearly this is like an intentional, I mean, obviously intentional, but important thread in this story.
Right. I mean, it's not like King just made him black and said, okay, I'm going to have this guy be a black man, and that's it. No, he's going to do something with it. He's going to explore something with it. And we've talked as we've gone through these books that King, you know, I think he's always trying. I think he's had, you know, better success with depicting black characters than others. And I mean, we're both white guys, so we can't like critique the success of this depiction of a black a 60-year-old black man living in the 70s, of course. But I don't know. I think there is something really interesting about it, that he's trying to have this kind of define who Dick is as a person, and
Yeah.
I really
I,
I really like it. I mean, I want to get into this part here. Like, Dick kind of rushes back to his work and tells his boss, he lies to his boss. He tells his boss that his son was shot by his ex-wife's current boyfriend, and he's up in Colorado kind of fighting for his life, and he needs to go rush up to him. And so we get this guy named Queems, who is, I kind of think, Matt, I don't know if you agree with me on this, but Queems is like, I think, an example of King like really missing getting to stretch his random King character muscles that he hasn't gotten to stretch for a while, because it's just been 3 people locked in a hotel for so many pages, and he's like, oh yeah, we've cut away now. Now we're gonna just have 20 different random characters, and I'm all going to spend some time on showing what type of people they are and doing this like hyper fast characterization that still somehow gets you to understand who they are completely.
That's hilarious. No, I mean, you're right that it's almost like he's been, training with a weight vest on or something by writing a story that doesn't have a whole bunch of random characters, because that's obviously his strength as a writer, or one of his many strengths. But yeah, no, I love all these random characters that we meet in this Dick section here.
Yeah, and to kind of go back to what we were talking about before, though, here's what Queems reacts with when Dick tells him this. He says, Jesus Christ, Queems said. There was a particular tight expression of concern on his face, one Halloran was familiar with. It was as close to an expression of sympathy as a white man who thought himself as good with the colors could get when the object was a black man or his mythical black son. Right? That's interesting, right? I mean, this is again talking about the way Dick has kind of resigned himself to see the world, that he's been around the block for a long time. He's dealt with all different types of people a long time, and he's used to this type of person and what this type of person's reaction to his particular problem would be, which is not sympathy, right? But it's this kind of disconnected sympathy, or at least from Dick's perspective, it's this I don't see us as the same, but I still feel bad for you, like I would feel bad for some random animal or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it there. It's just this guy, I think, is standing in for a lot of the people that Dick has to interact with in his life, and the way they think of him and the way they treat him.
So as Halloran packs to go, he thinks about death once again and how he might be going to his. And this is, we talk about why make the character black, right? Why make that choice? And it is, I think, to comment on all these things we've been talking about. But one of the things I really like about it as well, one thing it does is it puts this not wall, but there's a very distinct difference between the Torrances as this nuclear white family, right? And then Dick Halloran as this single elderly black man, and they are just completely different types of people living completely different types of life, totally different from each other. But Dick feels this connection. He feels this connection to Danny, and he sits here pondering the idea that he's going to go risk his life for 3 people he barely knows, but he can't lie to himself, right? He says, no, that's not true. I know Danny. I've had, like, having a conversation in each other's minds, you learn more about a person than you would, hundreds of conversations, with your voice. And so that's one of the reasons he's going, is because he can't lie to himself, which, by the way, there's like 20 different ideas I have at the same time here, Matt, but I do love that this idea that Halloran can't lie to himself in this moment makes a really wonderful contradiction with Jack, and how Jack is like continually lying to himself, continually building narratives around the truth as he wants it to be.
I really love that. And I didn't make the connection between Jack and Dick Halloran, but now that you've pointed it out, it really does seem obvious in a number of ways. I mean, we just talked about the idea that Florida and its sunniness and its openness is being contrasted against the Overlook Hotel and its enclosure and cold and isolation. And here we have a man who is, mentally and spiritually open, and he's having these very kind of joyful interactions with other people that he just meets and interacts with in his daily life there's no there's no veiled officious little prick
Yeah.
type like internal narration happening where Dick
Hmm.
actually secretly hates everyone who he encounters. He accurately assesses when people are kind of being um uh weird with him because of his race, but he's not using that as like an excuse to just like ruminate on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could say actually one reason for choosing to make Dick Halloran a black character is to say like this guy has way more reason to be angry at the world, but he's not.
Yeah.
And here we have Jack, who's angry at everything and feels like everything is unfair,
Yeah.
despite the fact that he's been handed every advantage in life.
Right, you're so
Um,
right. You're absolutely right. Jack is a character who's constantly talking about how he's just inadvertently stuck his hand in the wasp nest every single time. And here you have Dick Halloran, a black man living in the early late 20th century, just within the last 20 years gotten basic civil rights, right? And he's not complaining. He's just living his life and enjoying it as much as he can, and he's experiencing these things constantly. If we want to say like Dick is like wasps are being thrown at him constantly, and he's not complaining about it. He's just saying, "Well, this is my life, and I'm gonna do it the best I can."
yeah. I mean, you could also say it's being he's old, right? And
Yeah,
when
yeah,
like Jack's complaining about like basically can't let go of the fact that he's not this young buck anymore. And in contrast, Dick Halloran's like, I could die at any moment,
yeah.
and I've accepted that.
That's true. That's true.
It's just once you start thinking about it, I really do think the
Yeah.
contrasts are endless and intentional.
I did want to read this part again that ties back to the other thing I was talking about real quick. He's talking about the shine, and it says, and sometimes that light that shined seemed like a pretty nice thing. You could pick the horses, or, like the boy had said, you could tell your daddy where his trunk was when it turned up missing. But that was only dressing, the sauce on the salad, and down below there was a much bitter vetch in that salad as there was a cool cucumber. You could taste pain and death and tears, and now the boy was stuck in that place. And he would go for the boy, because speaking to the boy, they had only been different colors when they used their mouths. So he would go. He would do what he could, because if he didn't, the boy was going to die right inside his head. But because he was human, he could not help a bitter wish that the cup had never passed his way. So I love that, right? I mean, that again is, I think, another reason that we have Dick Halloran being a black character is what we talked about. This idea that, like, they're people of different colors, and the world looks at them very, very differently. They kind of even look at each other differently a little bit. But this power, this shining, unites them and unifies them and equalizes them, in a rather simple way, in Dick's mind at least. That means he has to go. He owes it to this kid.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think King is kind of making a beautiful statement about the universal humanity inside of all of us. And when you again, by the conceit of there being magical mind powers, you can actually reach past someone's exterior and touch their soul, basically.
Yeah.
You realize that, hey, we are all the same under the surface.
Yep.
I'm also glad you pulled this out, because the cup had never. He wished the cup had never been passed his way. Of course, reminds me of Mother Abigail in The Stand, saying the same thing multiple times. It's kind of a refrain in her thoughts. This book was published in 1977. The Stand was published in 1978. And these are obviously very similar characters in a number of ways. So I think this is just a theme that was on his mind at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, King has been criticized, for using this kind of quote unquote magical Negro trope, and we've talked about that before, and I totally get, and I think those criticisms are very valid. And again, it's not an experience I can really speak to, right? But I do think, at least, the reason, like we said, the reason for making these characters African Americans are because he wants to explore this idea. And what it must be like, and again, he's using the tropes of genre of magical powers to really get at who these people are and the expectations that are placed on them by the world. And I don't know, I really like it.
Yeah, me too.
So from here, the story flashes back to Dick's encounter with the woman in 217. Not too much to talk about here, Matt, other than Dick had experienced a few of the hotel's eccentricities before, but never anything quite like the woman in 217. I love the recurring parenthetical that we see here. I'm going to continue to talk about King's parentheticals because I love them so much. But like as he's kind of gearing up mentally to reminisce on the story, like we keep seeing she had started to get up and come after him, like in parentheticals in the middle of paragraphs here. And I think that does this really interesting thing, which reinforces the idea that Dick on some level knew that these were slightly more than just pictures in the book from the beginning. And so he was lying to Danny a little bit, or better said, trying to lie to himself. I wonder, we talked about how Dick is down in sunny Florida and being honest. And then at the Overlook, when he tells them they're nothing more than pictures in a book, they won't hurt you, is him kind of building a narrative around something he doesn't actually believe. I wonder if this idea about that is central to the Overlook itself. That is it a place, an idea that represents telling yourself a story that is not 100% true.
Yeah, a place that's built around motivated reasoning and not being honest with yourself. Or that promotes that kind of thinking, because there are these dark secrets that people don't want to look at, and there's kind of nothing you can do about it. And so you tell yourself a story about how it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, that's the history of the hotel itself, right? And that's, I mean, getting back to what we talked about, I think in the first episode, just the central idea of what is a hotel. What does a hotel represent? What does a hotel mean in the lives of people? And it is this place where you can hide the truth, kind of, and do like there was mafia things going on, there was infidelities going on, like there's just, it's a place where you don't have to be, I don't want to say you don't have to be yourself, because that's not quite what I mean. It's just a place where you can craft a story around what you want.
And then the hotel will always return to just being the same.
Yeah.
That no matter what happens in the halls of the hotel, they will clean the carpet, they will replace the wallpaper, and they will rent out that room again to somebody else. And you will be none the wiser to what happened there. And it's a constant act of pretending nothing happened. If anybody speaks up about it, you fire them. I think, that seems really important, actually, this idea that a hotel is a place with no memory in one sense. But this is, this hotel does have a memory, or rather, all hotels have a memory. It's just that it's a repressed memory. That's very cool.
I like that.
So also, okay, so you just mentioned the parenthetical, the sort of jarring parenthetical that brings us into this memory of Dick's. And I guess the parenthetical, the sort of intentionally jarring interjection, has happened enough times that I really want to center it and have a little conversation about it, because it's not something I really remember King doing very much outside of this book. But then in this book, it becomes this repeatedly used technique. It's like a cinematic whip pan, or like a hard cut, you could say, to something unexpected. And there's every time he does it in the writing of this book, there's this brief disorientation that he creates that I'm sure is an intentional disorientation, where for just a second you're like, what? And then you get it before the book actually explains it to you, because you're like, oh, okay, the bathtub, right? And then you read on, but it's an intentional bit of confusion, which is really interesting.
No, I think you're right, and I think it is kind of unique to this book. I mean, obviously the mid-sentence parenthetical is not unique to this book. That's a King technique that he's used throughout many of the books we've read, but I do agree that it is used here in a really interesting way, because, well, I think first of all, because we're not always quite clear where that parenthetical is coming from, right? Like, many times it's the character's own intrusive thoughts bubbling to the surface, interrupting their own train of thought. But then sometimes it's external to them. But the interesting thing is the structure of the book doesn't treat those as different, and so it does introduce this confusion. Like there's no syntax for when the hotel is screaming in Danny's head versus when it's his own intrusive thoughts, right? there's no difference in those. The syntax of the story treats those two things exactly the same. So there are these moments of like, where is this thought coming from? We've had this conversation several times throughout the book so far, is like, where is this particular thought coming from? The idea of, kill her, is that coming from Jack? Is that coming from Jack's subconscious, or is that the hotel reaching out and speaking to him, or something within the hotel reaching out and speaking to him? And because we don't know for sure, it introduces that like you said, kind of controlled confusion and ambiguity. And I love it. I really do. I think it's so effective. It is one of, I think, the hallmarks of this book. It is definitely one of the hallmarks of early King in general, but I think used to perfection in this story.
Yeah, and I mean, to connect it to what you were just saying about the idea that like this is a story about things that are suppressed and buried. These are thoughts I feel that these are thoughts that are bubbling up from repressed memory.
Mm-hmm.
Or repressed inclinations in the case of kill her. Feelings or memories that you just don't want to look at, don't want to acknowledge.
Sure.
In the cases where it's not just like hotel telepathy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's unique to this book, maybe, is that it's a thing that King is reserving for like this thematic focus on the unrepressible, repressed. I think this is great. I love that. It's cool because I was like, why doesn't he keep using this? Because it seems like the kind of technique that an author would just have in their pocket and just use, but it really does seem like it's specific to this book, and I think we're kind of onto the trail of why that might be.
Yeah. All right, so Dick buys a ticket for that evening, and he almost makes it to the airport on time. Unfortunately, he is pulled over for speeding, and then to make matters worse, the cop decides to test him for a DUI. I think this is one of those things, again, where the book doesn't come out directly and say this, because Dick doesn't really come out and directly say this. But I do think it's one of the interesting subtexts of this chapter is, was he pulled over for driving while black, or what? Why was he given a breathalyzer test? Like, why did the cop decide to do that? Is it because he was black? And I don't think the text says that definitively, but it has the thought there, and I think it's kind of primed you for that. This idea that like, well, maybe he would have made his plane on time if he had been a white man or something. Maybe the story would have been different if he hadn't had to overcome this challenge where he was speeding. Like, he should have gotten pulled over for speeding. He was doing that, but why was he tested for drinking? He hadn't been drinking. We know he hadn't been drinking.
Yeah,
and
totally.
There's only one person in the story who's been drinking, and he's not getting pulled over. Again, there we go again. How many times has Jack driven through the night, almost killing people? Has he gotten a DUI? No, he hasn't. Here's a sober guy driving to the airport to go help someone. Yeah. DUI breathalyzer test.
Yeah, immediately. Yeah, no, you're totally right. That's definitely in the back of your mind, because it has been primed, as you say. That's great. I mean, also, like, it's funny because Dick has superpowers, right? But I guess I just really like that the way the shine is portrayed in this book is not that great. Like, it can help him kind of assess whether his deceptions are working. He can pick the horses, like he says. I guess that's pretty useful. But like, it's not so powerful that he can just like hypnotize the cop and get out of the speeding ticket. He still very much lives in this constrained, difficult world that we all live in.
Yeah, and I mean, we see this moment. We didn't talk about it, but there's a moment where I think he's stopped to buy his plane ticket via the payphone, and he like gets a whiff of shine from a woman standing at the store there, and just like gets this whiff of her internal thoughts about things that she's worried about at home. And that's really what it is for him most of the time. It's just like he's standing around living his life, and then suddenly these intruding thoughts from other people, talking about not necessarily repressed memory, but the intrusion of thoughts into your mind is something that people with the shine deal with constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. It's especially if you think about Dr. Sleep, seems to be on net a negative, actually.
Sure. All right, so he misses his flight, and our chapter ends. So we move on to chapter 39. We cut back to the Torrances. The chapter is titled On the Stairs, And that's where we begin, because Wendy finds Danny walking around on the stairs. His lip has been swollen due to the fall after his visit with Tony. Wendy, of course, thinks that Jack did it to him, but we learn very quickly that, of course, this was not the case. Wendy finds him a bit shell-shocked, and I think we see here that Danny in this moment has kind of finally started to realize the truth of what is going to happen. I love this, where Wendy is thinking who did this. Danny reads her mind and says, "Daddy didn't do it," he answered. "Not today," which is just holy shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's tomorrow is the 2nd, right? Tomorrow is December 2nd, and that's what the clock said in his Tony vision. So
yeah, definitely building that foreshadowing.
mm-hmm. And I love this another parenthetical, but this one comes from Wendy. "Oh, we are wrecking this boy. It's not just Jack, it's me too. And maybe it's not even just us. Jack's father, my mother. Are they here too? Sure, why not? This place is lousy with ghosts anyway. Why not a couple more? Oh, Lord in heaven, he's like one of the suitcases they show on TV, run over, dropped from the planes, going through factory crushers, or a Timex watch. Take a licking and keeps on ticking. Oh, Danny, I'm so sorry." Really heartbreaking stuff, Matt.
Yeah, I don't think I've felt this protective toward a fictional character in recent memory, maybe with the exception of Fiverr. But I love Danny. I love Danny so much.
Mm-hmm. I love this idea of this place is lousy with ghosts anyway. This idea. I think there's this idea, metaphorically of what is happening or what is being inflicted upon this kid is, unresolved trauma from his mother's childhood, unresolved trauma from his father's childhood, presumably unresolved trauma from whatever those two people have going on. But it's not just that, right? It's also like as you said, the hotel is this place of secrets and unresolved trauma, and so it's like it's not just your immediate family's history and past that is kind of beating down on people. It is everything. It is the world. And that is one of the things that is really pressing down on Danny right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a depressing outlook too, because the book doesn't really suggest any kind of out. It doesn't really suggest like a way to be free of this generational trauma. I'm not saying that it's the book's responsibility to do so or anything like that. It's just interesting how it's really quite a bleak philosophy that is kind of implicit in the story, where it's like, yeah, you it's almost saying that generational trauma just accrues and accumulates over time, and almost like we're helpless to struggle against it, because like Jack and Wendy can both be said to be struggling against it, but they're both kind of failing in that effort.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know that Jack is going to fail. And it's I don't know. Book's not over yet, but it's just, I guess I just want to remark what a kind of sad, depressing framing this is. I don't know. Do you agree at all?
I do. I mean, I think the thing we could say is they're not really actively like doing anything to actually deal with that trauma, right? Like, I know I'm about to put a 2023 lens on, but like no one's in therapy, right? No one's actually seeking help for the stuff that they are suffering from. The plan of attack for both of them was just kind of cold turkey. Wendy just cuts off her mom and says, "I'm done with this," which, sometimes you do need to cut off abusive parents. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do, but she just said, okay, well that problem solved then. And obviously, no, it's not. Jack, oh, I'm done with the alcohol. I'm done. I quit. And there's my problem solved too. Obviously, what's going on with Jack is way more complicated than just the disease of alcoholism he has, and that doesn't solve anything. So, I mean, I agree with you. Like, this is kind of, we're seeing trauma beget trauma, but I'm not sure I'd necessarily agree that like the movie is saying there's no hope for us. Actually, we're just going to continue suffering from the mistakes of the past.
I mean, maybe the book will present some kind of potential out at some point. I don't know. I guess I'll keep my eyes open for it. I mean, it's funny because even the phrase like resolving your trauma or it's like these are also 2023, concepts. This book is like almost 50 years old now. I don't think they were. I, I don't even know if what I'm talking about is a statement about the book or a statement about the times,
Sure.
because even the sort of, you know, in the current zeitgeist notion that like there's something you can do about your trauma, kind of seems like a new idea, at least phrased that way or framed that way. I don't know.
Especially in storytelling, for sure.
Yeah,
Like every genre story these days is about trauma in some way.
Yeah, right. And I know that you and I are also like super kind of like I guess biased is a fair word, because we spent a whole podcast talking about, we spent the whole the parahumans Worm and Ward stories are very centrally about trauma, um, as a theme, and recovery from trauma as a separate theme.
It is now, it's really delightful, the idea that like the difference between a story written in the 1970s and a story written in the early 2010s and late 2010s is the idea that like they're both like trauma, and 70s are like fuck, man. and then 2010s is like, okay, but can we do something about this? And 70s is like, man,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. Not that I would necessarily call Worm optimistic about that question either.
But if you look at that series as a whole, I think it gets there eventually. I don't know. I think this is really interesting. I think, you know, the 1970s are pretty famous for having like being the decade of like depressing endings. Like the movies that were in the cultural zeitgeist were not like ones that were like feel good, make you happy about the state of the world movies. They were much reflective of the times, which is like deep-seated cynicism about all of our systems and their ability to actually look out for us and help us. So I think that's reflecting of the times for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't even have a direction I wanted to go or a place I wanted to land, so much as just air this feeling that I've been having about the book, and maybe we can see if this goes anywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see if we can come back around to it at the end.
Okay.
So Danny tells his mom that he can't reach Tony anymore. The hotel will not let him. I think the most interesting thing about all this to me is that Danny tells us that the hotel wants all three of them, not just Danny, all three of them. But of course, it wants Danny the most. I love this thing that he introduces, that the hotel is lying to Jack, saying it wants him the most. It's not true. It's not true at all. But this is, you know, you talked about, you know, Jack's pride, and it's attacking him right in that pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pushing all of his buttons.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then we get this question here. Is he going to try to hurt us? They'll try to make him. I love this for many reasons. I think that's such an ominous beat to have like a child say that, like, yes, my father is going to try to hurt us. They're gonna try to make him do it. But I really, the thing I grabbed onto here is that Wendy doesn't say, Daddy, is he going to try to hurt us, or is your father? It's just Jack. How many times in the book has Wendy referred to Jack Torrance as Jack to Danny? Not many, right? It's usually Dad or Daddy. Mm-hmm. But here, when she asks that question, this all important question, is Jack going to hurt us? It's Jack to her. It's a kind of like she's distancing him from connection to her, from connection to Danny, in this moment where she's asking this horrible question.
Yeah, no, I love that. I don't think I noticed it consciously, but you're right. It's a kind of using language to decouple him from the familial relationship.
Mm-hmm. So Wendy goes and gets a knife while Danny allows himself to hear the hotel again. He kind of turns his shine on. And this writing is, I have to, I know it's long, Matt, but I have to read this. It's so good. Now his ears were open, and he could hear them again, the gathering, ghosts or spirits, or maybe the hotel itself, a dreadful funhouse where all the sideshows ended in death, where all the specialty painted boogies were really alive, where hedges walked, where a small silver key could start the obscenity, soft and sighing, rustling like the endless winter wind that played under the eaves at night, the deadly lulling wind of the summer tourist never heard. It was like the solemn hum of summer, wasps in the ground nest, sleepy, deadly, beginning to wake up. They were 10,000 feet high. Why is a raven like a writing desk? The higher the fewer, of course. Have another cup of tea. It was not a living sound, but not voices, not breath. A man of philosophical bent might have called it the sound of souls. Dick Halloran's Nana, who had grown up on southern roads in the years before the turn of the century, would have called it haunts. A psychic investigator might have a long name for it: psycho, echo, psychokinesis, a telesmic sport. But to Danny, it was only the sound of the hotel, the old monster creaking steadily and even more closely around them. Halls that now stretched back through time as well as distance, hungry shadows, unquiet guests who did not rest easy. That's just fucking great, man. And this is King like totally trying to channel as much Shirley Jackson as he possibly can, because there's a lot of the opening of Haunting of Hill House in this to me. It's really, really, really good writing. It's really good stuff, and I really love it.
So I think it's delightful that you immediately had a reference here, because I was actually sitting here thinking, this is reminding me how I was just listening to Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian and how I was thinking about how Stephen King is so obviously a guy who is writing like a version of Cormac McCarthy who loves genre fiction and wants to be more accessible.
That's great.
I mean, we'll talk about this when we talk about Blood Meridian this weekend, but like the influences of McCarthy on King, I think, are pretty evident. And just like this style, I mean, you could totally be right. This could be more of a Shirley Jackson thing than it is a McCarthy thing, but just the poeticism and the language, the imagery, all of it comes together really beautifully. I love this stuff.
Yeah. And we have to talk about that parenthetical in there too, right? Like in the middle of this beautiful language, we have, they were 10,000 feet high. Why is a raven like a writing desk? The higher the fewer, of course. Have another cup of tea. Which, again, this is a reference that the book doesn't explain, but kind of hinting toward. This is Alice in Wonderland, Matt. I don't know if you knew this. This is the Mad Hatter asks Alice this riddle: why is a raven like a writing desk? And admits that there is no answer. Like this says the higher the fewer, of course, which is not actually the answer, because that doesn't make any sense at all. There is no answer. The point is that the riddle doesn't have an answer because he's insane, and there is no answer. And this is just kind of injected in here. And again, this is Danny, right? Has Danny? It is. I guess it's possible that Jack read Alice in Wonderland to Danny, and he's internalized in this in some way, but maybe not. You know, I don't know.
I did know it was from Alice in Wonderland, by the way, but I forgot that it was a fake riddle that didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
And then I Googled it, and there's like 57 different answers people have suggested, which is really fun.
People have just offered up answers. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite being that a raven is nevar backwards, and a writing desk is always 4 words. Anyway.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I sorry. Yeah. No, this is, I just love the, just love the prose here. I really love the sense that like the longer they spend in the hotel, the more overtly awake and alive the hotel becomes. It just kind of ramping up this presence of the supernatural in the background, giving us the sense of like a being that they're like they're surrounded in this being, whereas before it was just a building, you know?
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right, and it fits. You know what you were talking about earlier, that like their world, their universe is shrinking, and it seems like it's like, I love this creaking steadily and even more closely around them. Right, this idea that it's their world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they're getting trapped on all sides by this thing that is waking up and slowly stretching closer to them.
Yeah, I love it.
The clock strikes 7:30, and Danny and Wendy go to bed behind a locked door as the hotel continues to wake up around them. And that's how our chapter ends. So from here we move to chapter 40, Matt, The Basement. We catch up with Jack at 5 a.m. He's been up all night, still poring over documents in the basement. Once again, Matt, just for you and for me and for the people listening at home, there's no mystery here. Like one of the things that Jack says right when he decides to call Ullman is he's pieced together the history of the Overlook. He's got it. He's got the seedy history of the Overlook. He's pieced it together. So like it says the sentence, still the vital clues, the connections that would make everything clear eluded him. Connections to what? Right? Like
Yeah.
I like this because I think this is like, you know, the old expression, looking for answers at the bottom of a bottle. Like this idea that like Jack is looking for a reason for why his life is terrible. He's looking for a reason for why all these things have happened to him. He's looking for a reason for why he keeps sticking his hand in the wasp's nest. And he's decided for some reason that the solution to all these things is the Overlook and these papers, which again, we've talked about have been used very clearly as metaphors for drinking in the earlier parts of the book, and he's still doing it, and there's no reason to anymore. There's no reason.
Yeah, I love it. I love your connection to trying to find answers at the bottom of a bottle. He doesn't even know what question he's asking, right? He hasn't even articulated that to himself. There's just this confusion and this frustration with his life. And maybe if I go through this folio of old milk bills, it'll clear up my frustration. Not that. And the last folio of milk bills has cleared anything up, but you can't be sure. Maybe it's just around the corner.
What's going to be in these milk bills?
Yeah,
it's like one day we ordered ostrich milk. The Overlook now makes sense.
Yeah, there is something really Lovecraftian and creepy about the idea of like, just like from the third person watching this man like very attentively leafing through like receipts page after page. And you just being like, why? Like what? And he's not looking for anything in particular. It is one of those like uncanny things that is actually kind of uncomfortable, and I love it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that Kubrick's interpretation of this was Jack, calmly and deliberately and over what must have been hours and hours and hours typing that sentence over and over and over again in the typewriter, right? And the Kubrick version of the story does not have any history papers or anything. So like he took that general concept of just the tediousness of what it must have been like to actually leaf through the stuff page by page by page, night after night after night, and turned it into that typewriter bit, which is very effective in that film, like super effective. But I do agree that there's maybe it'd be a little bit harder here to draw clear, like to just the amount of time spent doing this. I don't know.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, I can't believe I never connected those two things. But yeah, I mean, it's an endless, absolute waste of time where his attention is spent on something that doesn't matter. And the creepy thing is to think like what was going through his head as he was doing this, which is the same in this case too. As he's looking through milk bills or as he's typing all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, you're like, I am so alienated from this character in this moment. I don't understand what is going on in his head, and that is uncomfortable.
I mean, I know we said we're not going to talk about the movie very much, but because we've got a whole episode, we're going to be doing that. But that is still one of the scariest moments in the world to me that I've ever seen. Not because it's actually like literally like shockingly frightening, but just as your mind turns over, like the sheer amount of time it would have taken to type that many pages of that, it's just horrifying. I love it so much. So I mean, I think Kubrick did manage to capture this central idea and display it in a way that was sufficiently terrifying. But I mean, I love that King is able to, via the form of a novel, like just show us this via, once again, Jack is down here leafing through fucking milk bills.
Yeah. Just cinematically, Wendy finding the stack and flipping through the pages works in a way where there can be no equivalent book way of doing that. So this works. Yeah.
So Jack, in this moment, realizes that he forgot to release the pressure on the boiler for almost a day, and in that time, it's gotten up to 210 psi and looks ready to blow. And in this moment, Jack hesitates. He thinks about just letting it go, letting it blow up, just getting Danny and getting Wendy and getting out. And he even thinks to himself, "It's my last chance."
And maybe it is.
Maybe it is, yeah. And as Jack thinks about this, he thinks about another childhood memory, one in which his father uh, dealt with a wasp nest. Here we have the wasp metaphor once again here, Matt. By lighting some damp leaves on the ground under the nest, the smoke wafts up and confuses and pacifies the wasps. I really love here, Matt, because we have this moment where he turns to his son and says, "The smoke makes him drunk, Jackie," Jack's father says, which that's an interesting choice of words, right? And it's not the smoke confuses him, the smoke disorients him. The smoke makes him drunk because the wasps aren't actually drunk, you know? They're just in that they haven't consumed any alcohol, but they've been by the smoke been pushed into a state that's like drunkenness. And now we're forced to say, well, I wonder if that's going to be happening to someone else in a couple pages.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, the idea of being drunk is portrayed here as more like being drugged, being put into a stupor, mental and physical stupor, where you're now vulnerable and you can be, manipulated, you can be destroyed.
Yeah. And that forces us to once again look at this metaphor, right? Because Jack throughout this book has seen himself as the victim, right? He's the one that sticks his hand into the wasp nests. The wasps is the world stinging him, punishing him. But in this moment, in this metaphor that Jack has so nicely crafted for us, we see it turned and mutated, because what is the hotel doing but getting Jack drunk to pacify and control him, right? And in that framing, Jack is the wasps, right? Jack, and that is certainly what it is, right? This idea that he sees himself as the victim, and actually he's the one, he's the guy responsible, and he's the wasp. He's not the hand, he's the wasp itself.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I admit I'm being way too free with metaphor here, but you can kind of view the hotel as like the nest and Jack as the wasp, right? He's kind of the vector of violence. And the wasp nest is just the place that he's protecting, or serving, you could say. I mean, I'm going to butcher the metaphor again and say, well, obviously the wasps are also directly parallel to the hotel itself, or to the unquiet residents thereof, in the sense that we know that there's going to be a great burning of the hotel and its residents, which is parallel to the burning of the wasp nest by Jack's father. So it's okay. It's okay. Metaphors all over the place.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the thing. Here's the daddy says, sets fire to the wasp nest because fire kills everything and anything, we're told here. And this is the moment, Matt, where the hotel gets its hands on him again, and Jack dumps the pressure. And once again, we have to talk about these parentheticals, and King is continually representing the rise of the hotel and the deteriorating mental state of the Torrances through these random, as you said, whip pan interjecting parentheticals. It's like, how do I show madness? How do I show craziness? I was like, oh, well, let's have things pop into people's minds. And that's what thing we have here is as Jack watches the pressure go down on the boiler, he's suddenly thinking about a song about the wreck of old 97, a story about a train that derailed, that was made into a pretty popular and oft covered song. And that's how he's relating this pressure. As he's watching the pressure go down, he's thinking of the song randomly. And it's just like, well, that's weird. Where did that come from?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's increasingly deranged, meandering thought process. Plus, he stayed up all night, which doesn't help.
Yeah. So then he also thinks this. He says he had failed as a teacher, a writer, a husband, and a father. He had even failed as a drunk. But you couldn't do much better in the old failure category than blowing up the building you were supposed to be taking care of. And this was no ordinary building, by no means. I love the idea that he failed as a drunk. Because he quit? Is that the framing? Is like, well, I quit being a drunk, so I couldn't even do that, which is fascinating.
I mean, that's a great example of his twisted thinking, where it's like, that doesn't make any sense, Jack. But he's so kind of drunk on his own poetry of the the great ballad of the tragedy of Jack Torrance that it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense. It sounds good. That's all. That's all he.
Yeah.
That's all he needs to sort of continue along that narrative.
It is really interesting though, because one of the things I think we've seen throughout the story, and we're seeing it here maybe more than ever, is this idea of Jack needing to create a narrative of his life that puts him in the victim seat, and all these things are things that are happening to him. It's not his fault. It's his bad luck. It's his lot in life. But then here we have another side of Jack, one that kind of pops up every so often, which is the self-deprecating "I suck" version, which is what we're, like he failed as a teacher, a writer, a husband, and a father. This is him admitting, again, it's weird. Like, you failed as a teacher. Is that because you got fired, or do you actually think you were a bad teacher? You failed, like, are you admitting that you were a shitty husband? Are you admitting that you've been a shitty father? Are you admitting that you're actually a joke writer who, like, I feel like this is part, like, he goes in one hand, woe is me, the world is against me, and in one hand, pity party, I suck. Like, it's just it flips back and forth between the two.
Well, and it seems very realistic too.
Sure.
I'll say that. I mean, I think we've noted this before, but only Jack is allowed to say these things to Jack, right?
Yeah, that's true.
If Wendy were to say, "You failed as a teacher, a writer, a husband, and a father," he would go insane.
Yeah,
and possibly literally kill her. But he's sort of aware of the truth of it, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it has to strike him in a moment where his pride is kind of inactive.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we're going to see a bit of this going forward, but the use of alcohol to control Jack is an interesting, like, evil destroys itself through line.
Sure.
Because it's a pretty bad way to control somebody. And it's a classic sort of like Crimson King-esque, like using somebody's weakness to get an advantage on them, but then that very weakness is like it makes them a poor servant, actually.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the chapter ends with Jack deciding he needs to get a drink, which is something we've heard him say, many times throughout the story so far. He says, "Geez, I could use a drink." But in this time, he says he just saved the Overlook, and he knows somehow that the Overlook will reward him with one for saving it. So he goes and gets it, and that's where our chapter ends.
Yeah, right.
We pick up with chapter 41, Daylight. It is the next morning, that same morning that we were just with Jack. Danny awakens from a dream about the Overlook exploding, which is definitely not a premonition at all. Danny just decides it was a tragedy nearly averted. Sure.
Okay.
I like how he says tragedy averted, though, right? Is it a tragedy? I don't know.
If it had killed all of them, it might have been a tragedy.
I guess so. I
mean, yeah, I don't know. You made me consider for a moment whether, like, Danny's beginning to care about the hotel, but I don't know if there's any real evidence for that.
Yeah. I like this line too. He looked over at his mother. Wendy lay on her side, the blankets up to her chin, a sheaf of straw-colored hair lying against her cheek. She looked like a child herself. And the reason I pulled that out was just entirely for that last line, because I think this is something you and I have been talking about, a lot through this story so far. Like, the idea of Jack kind of, regressing in a lot of ways on the playground. And then we have this line here where Danny wakes up. Danny, this child, this young child, wakes up, sees his mother, and she looks like a child, that he is the protector. He is the one that is going to have to get them out of the situation, the one that's going to have to protect them. She can't do that.
Yeah, it's great.
So Danny tries to reach out and mentally locate his dad, but before he can do that, he finds himself blocked out. Something screams, "Get out of his mind, you little shit." And this, Matt, I think is a really interesting escalation of things, because I think we've been asking this question throughout the last few weeks of, are we overly personifying the hotel? Is this one entity that is conscious and wants things, or is it just a random collection of, like, spooky ghosts and scariness? And we've seemingly started trending towards the former, and I think this firmly lands us in the former, right? That there is pushing us towards this general personification of the Overlook as a thing. Later we'll will identify this as the manager, right? Which seems to be a stand-in for the overall desire of the hotel itself, which is
Yeah.
an interesting escalation of things, I think.
Yeah, I think King definitely withheld this from us until
Mm-hmm.
right about now, where it becomes really clear suddenly that there is an escalation. There is a lot more clarity provided.
Yeah.
The idea of the manager as this higher personality, the hotel itself, you could say, although
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's quite true. And the other ghosts are just kind of residents. I mean, as we'll see as we go forward in the next couple of chapters, the hotel seems to almost have this um, power over the ghosts that reside
Mm-hmm.
inside it. It seems to be able to kind of alter um, the ghosts, like what we see happening with Grady.
Yeah.
But I'm getting ahead of myself, obviously. But it really, between the beginning of this week's reading and the end, we really have a very different impression of what's happening.
Yeah, no, definitely. So Danny leaves the room to go look around the hotel, but he's stopped in the main corridor by a dog man.
Uh-huh.
The man looked up at him. His eyes were tiny and red. He was dressed in some sort of silvery spangled costume. A dog costume, Danny realized. Protruding from the rump of this strange creation was a long and floppy tail with a puff on the end. A zipper ran up the back of the costume to the neck. To the left of him was a dog or wolf's head, blank eye sockets above the muzzle, the mouth open in a meaningless snarl that showed the rug's black and blue pattern between fangs that appeared to be papier-mâché. The man's mouth and chin and cheeks were smeared with blood. Well, okay, then there's a spooky dog man ghost now.
Yeah. I mean, half of the horror of this is that it's just so dang weird.
Yeah.
And like inexplicable. I mean, it's funny because we kind of do understand what's happening with the ghost dog later, but in this moment it's just bizarre and surreal.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see the character who is dressed in the dog costume, and we'll see how the hotel treats him. And so it's really interesting that, like, in the perspective of Jack, when we see that guy, he's like a piece of shit that's like desperately trying to throw itself at the original owner of the hotel, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but like, just to curry favor with him is not at all menacing, kind of actually more embarrassing. And here, from Danny's perspective, this guy is just terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And then we have this little bit here. The hotel was running things now. Maybe at first things had only been accidents. Maybe at first things he had seen were really like scary pictures that couldn't hurt him. But now the hotel was controlling these things, and they could hurt. So he realizes in this moment that he's trapped, that he can't get down the hallway. The hotel doesn't want him there. So he heads back to the bedroom, knowing in this moment that his father is damning himself, and he's completely powerless to do anything about it. In desperation, he reaches out to Dick one last time, and the hotel tells him no in the middle of his sentence. It cuts him off, and we got to talk about this, Matt, because in this moment he says, "Dick, please come quick. We're in bad trouble, Dick. We need..." And suddenly, in the darkness behind his eyes, the thing that chased him down the Overlook's dark halls in his dreams was there, right there. A huge creature dressed in white, its prehistoric club raised over its head. "I'll make you stop it, you goddamn puppy. I'll make you stop it because I am your father." So that's... So, I mean, that's the first moment I think we have of Danny recognizing and really reckoning with, in his conscious mind, the fact that this monster that's been chasing in his dreams the whole time has been his dad. But there's a lot of interesting language here, right? A huge creature dressed in white. Jack's not wearing white.
Yeah, I admit that I don't really know what to make of some of this stuff. Like, why is it it's a prehistoric club, and it's like it's always been a roque mallet. It's always been very specifically a roque mallet. So the idea that it's a prehistoric club, I mean, it's almost like this is not, well, yeah, it's like this is not the visions that he's been having. This is a kind of psychic interjection from the hotel, which is pretty different actually from his usual, because his usual visions are like visions. They're premonitions. They're warnings. This is more of an attack.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I do get it though. I don't really know why the prehistoric.
Well, so the dressed in white, Jack's father was a nurse, and he wore white scrubs, and that's been told to us several times.
Okay.
So that feels to me like Jack is fully channeling his father in this moment, or the hotel is like blurring these generational lines together, because in this moment Jack is saying the same things that his dad was saying. And so like in the moment that he's going to do the most harm, he's channeling his dad, which makes you wonder if the use of prehistoric club in this vision, it is not the Roque mallet, it is his dad's cane.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. Now that you've said that, yeah, it's like it's like the hotel has taken the boogeyman out of Jack's head and is using that boogeyman against, because it doesn't actually say that this is Jack.
Yeah, I am your father, Jack Torrance. No, it just says I am your father. Yeah. Which could be Jack's dad. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I thank you for fixing that for me.
All right, from here we move to chapter 42, Mid-Air. This is another Dick Halloran chapter. We find he has finally managed to get on a flight at 6:45 in the morning. We see that Dick attempted to call the park services to get help to the Torrance, but unfortunately, Matt, some stupid hikers got lost in a blizzard, and that is taking up most of their resources. No one will be coming for the Torrances. That is one thing we're very clear of. No one but Dick Halloran.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is important narratively that Dick give an honest try here, just because otherwise, as you're reading, you would feel the lack of having tried some other way of just him going there himself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
like this is one of those things where you wonder if it was like an editor note or just like when you're going through your own copy editing after you finish the story of like I just need to add a little bit here that just like papers over this thing.
I think this is the kind of important storytelling thing that King usually doesn't forget, because he knows where your head is at. He's just really good at anticipating, like, well, what are they going to be thinking at this moment, or what, are they going to have this niggling doubt?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's well thought out too, because there's not a good lie you can tell where you can be like, you need to go check on that family up in that isolated cabin with no contact, where the park ranger's not going to be like, how do you know? Yeah. What information do you have? And how do you know it? And there's just not a good, like, I thought about it. I was like, what better lie could Dick have told? And I couldn't really think of anything, honestly. So.
Yeah, I mean, it once again, I think shows the limitation of The Shining as a thing, is like you get this information, but you're kind of powerless to do anything with it, because you still have to operate in a world in which no one understands that stuff. And so it is incredibly powerful and has its benefits, but it also is deeply frustrating as well, because you're given information that you can't use.
Exactly.
So just as they begin to take off, Dick is hit with Danny's last desperate plea, which we know is stopped unfinished, which just adds to Dick's anxiety. I do like this moment where Dick is kind of like processing through this stuff, and he hasn't even begun to consider the possibility that the danger that is coming for Danny is his father. I think he says something to the effect of like, those three were good people and I need to help them. Or he says something to the effect of like, I hope his mom and dad are taking as good care of him as possible. Like it's not even on his mind, even someone with the shine, that the danger is from within the house.
Yeah, I mean, he may not really realize the degree of mortal danger that he's walking into at all. Because I don't think he understands that the hotel is this monster that kills and eats people, basically.
No. Matt, I really want to talk to you about this horn-rimmed glasses woman that we're introduced to. Another classic King character, right? She's just this woman randomly sitting near Dick in first class. He freaks out a little bit because of Danny's message, and she asks him about it, and he says it has to do with the steel plate in his head from the war. A lie. She offers a delightful little rejoinder to that, which is, it is the line soldier who ultimately pays for any foreign intervention, the sharp-faced woman said grimly. Is that so? It is. The country must swear off its dirty little wars. The CIA has been at the root of every dirty little war America has fought in this century. The CIA and dollar diplomacy. She opened her book and began to read. We will learn a little bit later here, Matt, that this woman has a bit of The Shining as well, and therefore has this kind of unspoken connection with Dick, but I don't know. I find her delightful. Like there's another quote a little bit later. I pulled it out, but we'll talk about it here. Where like she asks him if he had any like pings off of his plate in his skull during landing, and he says no, and she's just like, shame. You're just like, who is this woman? This woman who's randomly like, just imagine sitting next to someone on a plane and like ranting about the CIA. It's just so kind of weird and delightful.
Yeah. All right. I mean, the classic. There's something about traveling companions, where it'll be like a taxi driver or somebody in the plane seat next to you, that King just loves, and I mean, he does a great job with it too.
Yeah. All right, so from here we move to chapter 43, Drinks on the House. Oh, okay, Matt. So I want to preface this chapter with just this idea that like it is rare these days that I like get nervous or feel pressure from these episodes we have to do, because I've like gotten so used to having to come up with content every week, and the audience is in general like super friendly and understanding, that like pressure doesn't really happen with me anymore. But I feel a lot of pressure from this chapter, because I think this is the most important chapter we've covered so far. The idea that everything in Jack's story, everything in the story as a whole, has been leading to this moment where he takes his first drink. And also just the idea that I think this is, with only a little bit of hyperbole here, some of King's finest writing, and one of the best depictions of an addict succumbing to their addiction I've ever read, that I feel just a lot of pressure in this moment. So I say that just to like a preface of like, I didn't even really study for the test. I'm nervous about this, and I hope I'm going to do it justice. I hope we're going to do it justice.
Yeah, I forgot to read this chapter actually, Scott. So
no.
I hope you're ready. No, no, this is, like you said, this is great. This is almost like kind of the hinge that the whole story swings on in a sense. And also this is where we kind of cross that line that I mentioned at the top of the episode, where we, Jack is officially almost not Jack anymore, ? We'll talk about that as we go, I think.
Sure. All right, so Jack finds himself back in the Colorado Lounge as the hotel comes alive around him. I love, Matt, this description of the whole hotel eras folding upon themselves, the insanity of this whole thing. But my favorite line from the passage is this: drunkenness, hysteria, little love, not here, but a steady undercurrent of sensuousness. And he could almost hear all of them together, drifting through the hotel and making a graceful cacophony. So there's a lot, like the idea of, to go back to your old Pink and Red, right? Like, this is a place of not love. There's no love here, but sensuousness, passion, sex. These are things that are here.
Yeah, which is not really stuff that's been much in the story. I mean, I guess it's just interesting. There's this sordid, seedy kind of sexualized narrative of the hotel. I guess this is one of the weapons that the hotel uses against certain types of people. Reading between the lines, I guess you can say that.
Yeah, no, I think so. And it's I love the phrase "a graceful cacophony," right? That seems contradictory, right?
It's more Cormac McCarthy language.
So Jack walks through the Batwings into the lounge, and instead of being empty, it's full. We talked, Matt, about Jack's first trip to the Colorado Lounge, when he drank martinis that didn't exist and talked to a bartender that didn't actually respond back. We talked about how effective it was that this was at really selling the idea that this was all just in Jack's mind, his rapidly deteriorating mind. And I think it's here in this moment where all of that pays off, because this time Lloyd is real, right? This time we do hear Lloyd's dialogue. Like, imagine how less effective this moment would be if King wrote Lloyd dialogue, even if Lloyd was just a figment of Jack's imagination at the time, in the first time. It's because he did it that way this time that this time pays off so well, is so remarkably effective, I think.
Yeah, this week has been a land of contrasts, because once again, like, the contrast between that portrayal and this one makes this one land harder.
I agree. So Jack, without thinking, orders a martini, but even in this moment, he still kind of pushing against both the hotel and his desires. And all of it, I think, centers around Danny. Every time Lloyd mentions Danny, Jack has this moment of clarity almost, but it's quickly clouded over. But still, Jack pushes, at least for as long as he can, right? You get the sense of he's still, even in this moment, really trying to resist and just failing.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. The hotel's pulling out all the stops, trying to get him to basically break. And I think that's kind of why I guess I'll just mention again what I said a second ago, which is like it's really trying to push him past the point where it has control over him, where he kind of ceases to be Jack and just becomes a puppet of the hotel. But I think it needs him to lower his guard a certain amount before it can do that. And I think that's what we're watching.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally right, because there's this moment right before he drinks that like all conversation in the lounge stops. Everyone in the room is looking at Jack, waiting for him to take the drink, waiting for the moment, putting this pressure on him. Then everyone starts like saying, take a drink. Like it's all like this. It's insane. It's ridiculous. And it's everyone just waiting for you to do this. Just one little thing, right? This one little thing.
Yeah. It's a meaningless little thing. Yeah.
And we get this moment. He picked it up with a badly trembling hand. It was raw gin. He looked into it, and looking was like drowning. Jack brought the drink to his mouth and downed it in 3 long gulps, the gin highballing down his throat like a moving van in a tunnel, exploding in his stomach, rebounding up to his brain in one leap where it seized hold of him with a final convulsing fit of the shakes. When that passed off, he felt fine. I love how it's like, there's not even a moment of like pleasure when he does this, right? Like it's awful. Like he knows instantly it's awful.
Yeah.
He doesn't even really enjoy it, but he can't help himself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such an interestingly written bit that you just pulled out there. Like, first of all, the idea that like you drink, even if you drink straight liquor, it doesn't hit your brain in 2 seconds. At best, it's going to be a bit of a delay, right? So like it's borderline magical, or maybe explicitly magical here. The idea that almost like the moment he drinks it, there's like immediate drunkenness. It hits his brain immediately, and he's like shaking, convulsive fit of the shakes. That sounds horrible, obviously, right? The idea of like when that passed off, he felt fine. It's almost like an intentional understatement to emphasize what a sort of traumatic and painful experience this was for him.
Not an enjoyable one. Not like finally I can get off the wagon. He recognizes it as failure. He knows it's failure. And it's horrible. He doesn't enjoy it, but he can't help himself.
Yep.
So I got a couple things I want to talk to you about here. And the first one, I have a question for you, and spoilers for the discussion question. It's going to be a question for the rest of you out there too. Matt, whose fault is it that Jack took a drink? His or the Overlook's? And maybe a follow-up question to that. Does the answer to that question even really matter?
So, nobody copy me, okay? But my answer is to reference our Parahumans podcast again. We had a whole podcast about fault and culpability, and that was called We've Got Ward. So I can authoritatively say the following: without the intervention of the Overlook, he would not have taken the drink. So at least he wouldn't have taken the drink here and now. He might have taken the drink later, years later, maybe not ever. Maybe he would have been a teetotaler for the rest of his days.
Sure.
So in this specific sense, in the sort of counterfactual sense of the Overlook was here to provide the push, it is the Overlook's fault. In a different sense, of course, he wasn't literally forced to pick up the drink. It wasn't shoved down his throat. He did pick it up. He did drink it. So in that different sense, it's Jack's fault. But personally, I think that we're allowed to sustain 2 different definitions of that word and consider that the answer is different for, considering how you consider that word to operate.
You didn't answer the question.
Yes, I did.
You said yes.
Yes.
You said you took a question with two options and you said yes.
Well, I said that it depends on what the definition of is.
Okay, Bill. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, like and we're going to ask this question because I think it is a worthy thing to discuss because, we talked about, we've kind of been talking about this throughout the whole thing of like how we didn't want to put too much of the blame for Jack's actions on to an external force and say like, and Jack is actually the victim here, because I think that feeds into Jack's victim complex a little bit too much. But I mean, it is undoubtedly true that being in this hotel, like, I mean, the moment where you have like 50 ghosts surrounding him going, drink, 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 like that's a lot of pressure that any person would have difficulty pushing back against, right? Like, I don't know, like 50 people, let alone ghost people. I don't know. I feel like, Matt, if 50 ghost people like come up to me and start like chanting drink, I'm probably going to drink something that they want, because that's just a lot of pressure. But yeah, I mean, I think you're also absolutely true that Jack has gotten himself into this situation by continually making bad choices. And those choices were, of course, influenced and pushed and prodded by the hotel, but they were prodding at weaknesses that were there because Jack refused to acknowledge those weaknesses and deal with those weaknesses and attempt to better himself.
Yeah. And, just in general, we've said before, like a lot of bad choices had to be made to get into this position in the first place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Jack made 95% of those choices before the hotel ever was on the radar. Yeah. So,
and also the hotel is a metaphor. So the hotel pushing him to drink is just a metaphor for the things in our life that push us towards our worst possible choices.
True. So now that we've totally muddied the waters, have a shot at it, folks.
Yeah, good luck. The other question I have for you here is more of a semantics one, which I think is actually an interesting thing to talk about here. The question I have for you is, what is actually happening in this moment? Is Jack actually drinking real alcohol? Did the ghosts physically summon a physical bottle of gin that is real gin that he is consuming and is being processed by his system like gin? What do you think?
I think this is actually an easier one for me. I'm just going to go with yes. Because I mean, I do feel the pull to go Galaxy Brain on this one, but honestly, if the hotel can do minor magic and summon a cat's eye mask and some confetti to put in the elevator, then the hotel can probably summon some gin if it needs to.
That's fair. The thing I keep going back to in the reason why I'm going to disagree with you in this moment is the wasps and the smoke and the use of the word drunk there. This idea that they weren't really drunk. They were just acting drunk because of the smoke. And maybe whatever the hotel's been doing to Jack's mind is just another level of that's that kind of drunken smoke effect. That the act of drinking in this moment was opening your mind up to full influence of the hotel. I don't know. I think it works just fine if the ghosts can just summon alcohol. That's totally fine. I don't even know if we asked Stephen King this question, if he would be like, what? Yeah, it's gin. What are you talking about? But I don't know. I like the comparison to the wasps.
It definitely seems like past the point where he takes the drink, he's kind of not in the driver's seat anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was wondering how we were going to do this. Like, how are we going to get Jack from being the Jack that we know and love to the guy who is totally insane and trying to kill people with a mallet? And it seems like it involves this kind of relatively discreet step here where he kind of invites the hotel in metaphorically. It does make me wonder vaguely, like, well, if he didn't really drink alcohol, then did he really fall off the wagon? But I don't think it matters.
And the technicality. That's so great.
It's a pretty meaningless technicality, since he thought that he was drinking alcohol, and that kind of is all that matters. But
I'm not turning in my sobriety chip though, because I technically just consumed
yeah,
ectoplasmic alcohol, and
yeah,
that
it was
doesn't count.
hallucinated ghost alcohol. Yeah.
All right, so our chapter ends with a now intoxicated, or is he, Jack trying to wonder why he was worried about Danny in the first place. I mean, sure, he hurt him once, but, quote, that was before he learned how to handle his liquor. Which is when you know
Okay.
he's like gone, right?
Yeah.
Because that
Right.
was, first of all, never true.
Uh-huh.
And that is one of the, like, I think the more, like, again, Stephen King and his ability to know what your reaction is going to be, because that is a perfectly crafted quote to just make you go, oh fuck.
Uh-huh.
Y-
He's
Shit.
just saying things now.
Yeah. That has no connection to any bit of reality of any of the situations. Like, that's not even like constructing a narrative anymore. It's just a lie. It's just like a complete fabrication.
Yeah. Yes. It's GPT-3 babbling in his own head to just make him not have to be thinking about this anymore.
Yeah. All right, chapter 44, Conversations at the Party, one of the most innocent sounding chapter titles ever, and yet huge things happen. So we pick up with Jack dancing the night away with some dead lady as the party continues around them. We see the last bit of sobriety and Jack trying to push against what he's seeing. Once again, this is demonstrated in parentheticals. I really love this bit here. It's a parenthetical that says, the arguments against insanity fall through with a soft shirring sound, layer on layer. Who was that? Some poet he had read as an undergraduate? Some undergraduate poet who is now selling washers in Wausau or insurance in Indianapolis? Perhaps an original thought. Didn't matter. Matt, this is funny because that the quote there is actually from a Stephen King poem that he wrote back in college.
Oh my God.
It's especially fun because I think an eagle-eyed constant reader will recognize that they see this poem again. It is given to one of the main characters of King's book, Lisey's story, Scott Landon. There, it's a Landon original, and it's not just the first line. He's written a whole poem for it. I actually researched this and found out that King remembered writing this poem, but couldn't find the actual copy of the poem, and actually like called his old professor and said, hey, do you maybe have a copy of this? And he didn't. So the reason, Matt, why there's no more of this poem is because this is the only line that King could remember. And then decades later, when he wrote Lisey's story, he like rewrote it based off this one line. But this is just some random snippet of Stephen King that he worked in and said, who was that? Some poet he had read, some undergraduate poet who is now selling washers in Wausau. And that's great because I think this goes into, once again, King's fears about himself are being put into the Jack Torrance character.
Yeah. Which is especially kind of poignant in this moment where Jack has fallen off the wagon and succumbed and failed. And in this moment, King is choosing to identify with him. It's funny, in a way where in 1978 or whatever, nobody would have got that. This is just like a little Easter egg for Stephen King to himself, basically.
That's so true, because I don't think I looked it up, and I could be wrong, and someone smarter and better at research than me can probably prove me wrong. But the only time he talks about this poem is when he's talking about Lisey's story, which I think came out in 2009 or something around there. So not too long ago. I haven't seen any interview where he even in the interview where he's talking about this poem and Lisey's story, he doesn't mention at all, oh yeah, I also threw it into The Shining, that book I wrote 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So like he probably forgot. And yeah, I mean, this is just him kind of working through some internal stuff that, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. No one is going to actually pick up on in the moment. And maybe no one ever would have picked up on if he hadn't have written it in Lisey's story and talked about it in an interview during that. And
if he hadn't become like, Stephen King, right? Which he only sort of was at the time.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazingly interesting, actually.
Yeah. It's great. So one thing that Jack focuses on at the party as he's kind of dancing drunkenly around is good old Harry Derwent living or dying it up at the party. But especially as we talked about before, the dog man parading around him, presumably the same one keeping Danny locked up in his room, is down here behaving like an absolute moron to try to win Derwent's favor. And Jack, doing what he does, sees a metaphor in this and crafts it for us, does our job again. He suddenly felt closed in and claustrophobic. He wanted to get out. He wanted the Overlook back the way it had been, free of these unwanted guests. His place was not honored as the true opener of the way. He was only another of the 10,000 cheering extras, a doggy rolling over and sitting up on command. So he sees this dog man, placating himself at the feet of Derwent and immediately goes, "Oh, that's me. That's me.
Mhm.
What the fuck am I doing?" And again, I think it is really fascinating, and I think this is really interesting kind of rumination on what it must be like for an addict to fail, to succumb to their addiction. There's no pleasure in this. There's no moment in his drunkenness where the book like takes time to point out that he's enjoying being drunk again. Like it's a moment of like relief mixed in with shame and failure and guilt. And that's all it is the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. And the relief is only like, well, at least I don't have to wonder if I'm a piece of shit anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know,
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
I love also that to build onto this metaphor that Jack crafted for himself, as we continue through the scene, every time Jack is having thoughts of doubt about what is being asked of him in the moments, especially when he starts talking with Grady, we suddenly have Derwent and his dog man interject. There's like lines of like bad dog, and then every time Jack like agrees with something, it's like, ah, yes, good boy. Like, and it's talking to the dog man, but it's like placed over what's going on in Jack and like subtly reinforcing his decisions.
That's great. I didn't notice that, but that's perfect.
It really is.
You
It's
can
just like
kinda-
everything. It's like all this is for him, right? All this is for him. Everyone's
Yeah.
playing a part, but it's really just for him.
Yeah, right. And once again, that emphasizes how kind of the hotel has orchestrated all of this.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's almost like a window into the mind of the hotel and how the hotel sees all these spirits and Jack himself and his family as like something like a dog to be cajoled.
Mm-hmm. So just as Jack is having these thoughts of doubt, he bumps into a drink cart man who happily plies him with another drink, which pushes that sober Jack out of his head again and makes him once again more pliable. Jack, though, realizes that the drink cart guy is none other than our good old friend Delbert Grady, former caretaker turned ghostly psycho. Delbert says that his family didn't love the Overlook before either, but he corrected them, and now they do too. And he suggests strongly to Jack that he do the same. And I know we're trying not to reference the movie too much here, Matt, but I'm going to break my rule a little bit here because the dialogue from the film is taken almost verbatim from this scene, and I can't read it without hearing the actor who played Delbert Grady's like perfect line read in my head. Like he says, "My own girls, sir, didn't care for the Overlook at first. One of them actually stole a pack of my matches and tried to burn it down. I corrected them. I corrected them most harshly." It's so good, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we get to talk about the movie because I was always thrown off in the film at the idea that Grady speaks with this extremely posh British accent in the film when he's supposed to be this uneducated guy. But it turns out that this element is right out of the book, that it's explicitly called out as weird that Grady speaks this way. And the reason is that the hotel just likes Grady this way, just wants him to speak this way. So he does. So it just changed him.
Jack even catches up on that, right? He's like, "Didn't you say you dropped out of high school?" And the hotel even uses that and to be like, "Yeah, well, look what it can do for you. Look at the power it has, actually." Yeah.
Which is terrifying if you're in the position of being a ghost that's kind of owned by the hotel and it's just going to have its way with you. It's just going to change you and manipulate you and twist you in whatever way it wants. Incredibly terrifying implications. To be one of the beings that has been captured and ensnared by this hotel.
Yeah, definitely. So Grady also mentions in this moment that Danny has summoned DeCaloran. And again, I think, touching back on what we talked about in Dick's chapters, we do need to touch on the racism on display here, right? The use of the N-word. Jack himself, throughout the book, hasn't really shown any real like active racist tendencies so far in the novel, right, Matt? I don't think we've seen anything or gleaned anything from Jack that he's
Yeah.
super racist. And this is something that feels so external to him that it's coming from the hotel itself, but it is a mantle that he just kind of happily picks up and is like, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll be
Right.
racist now. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny to imagine that the hotel is racist, right? But it seems to be so. And yeah, I mean, this is what I mean when I say like some line has been crossed where Jack is he's just malleable and pliable now. He's just kind of like going along with it. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we're racist now. Yeah, well, makes sense. Sure.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we're supposed to be through all times, so we'll go back in time to even the more racist times, and
Yeah,
where
sure.
we couldn't even be allowed to be a cook in this kitchen. So
Yeah. That actually, I mean, I was half joking about the hotel being racist, but yeah, I guess in that sense, if it's just this old hotel, then yeah, it was founded in a period where that would have been kind of its world.
Next time you go to the Stanley, you should be like, "Excuse me, is this hotel racist?" Just see what they say.
I'll definitely ask that, Scott.
I don't think you're gonna do it.
Yeah, I'll say it quietly alone in my room is what I'll do, and which is kind of creepy actually. But no, like okay, so
creepy. Hold on, we gotta move on from just imagining you sitting alone in your hotel room,
asking
saying
if
out
the
loud,
hotel's racist.
Are you racist?
The hotel creaks loudly. What does that mean?
And like the walls are probably pretty thin, so there's like a guy in the room next to you going, "What the fuck?
Who's he talking to?" Yes. I mean, so the idea that it can make Grady speak in a totally different way, and the idea that it can make Jack suddenly be racist, I think it's like just showing that it has its hooks into him. It can really change him now.
So Grady Matt succeeds in convincing Jack that his son is a no-good troublemaker and that he must correct him as well. I think that's interesting because the way he kind of does it, he is very malleable, but again, they're using strategies on him. They basically imply that he would be a shitty father if he doesn't get his kid in line, And this is the exact right way to go at Jack, because you're challenging his pride in his ability to be things. And it's like, no, I'm a good dad, so I'll murder my son. And this to me is the really interesting thing about this, because it is in this moment that Jack seems to understand, at least on some level, what the hotel is asking of him, because he says basically, they want me to sacrifice my son. That's what they want. They want a trade. They want, this is the price, the bargain. And I'll go back, it does certainly seem in this moment that Jack has kind of abandoned his agency, right? Like at this point, as you've said, he's being tricked, connived, conned, and manipulated into this, to the point where, does he even have agency in this decision anymore?
Yeah. And again, it's hard to say. From my perspective, it does kind of feel like at a certain point, this is barely Jack anymore. Like, and again, we can, kind of blame the alcohol or at least the choice to invite the hotel into his soul, give up his agency, and then past the point when you've given up your agency, you don't get to take it back. It's too late. That I think there was a lot to this, him saying earlier, it's my last chance. I think that was his shining, kind of saying, this is your last chance, and now that he's drank the alcohol, it's over for him.
So Grady leads Jack to the clock that Danny observed in last week's reading, but instead of seeing the two figures fornicate like Danny did, Jack sees a father and son as he witnesses the father beat the son to death with a hammer, blood spraying from the clockwork and covering the dome over it. So once again, the hotel is not like hiding what it wants him to do here, right? Like this feels to me like a moment of triumph in the hotel. Like, we've got you now, and so we don't even have to like pretend that we're not asking you to murder your family. And like it's just this horrifying moment that like Jack is legitimately shocked and horrified for. Still, despite everything, still horrified, and it escalates into this kind of dizzying culmination of events that once again leave Jack back to the bar. This time he's totally alone. Everyone's gone because they've done what they needed to do with him, and now the party is over.
Yeah. That's great.
So he attempts to serve himself another drink, but slips and hits his head and passes out. We also get this line here. Once, he remembered, a very long time ago, he had been angry that there was no back bar mirror. Now he was glad. Looking into it, he would have seen just another drunk fresh off the wagon, bloody nose, untucked shirt, hair rumpled, cheeks stubbly. This is what it's like to stick your whole hand into the nest.
Except, Jack, you stuck it in actively. You stuck it in there on purpose, not accidentally like you did on the roof.
Yeah. Except for Jack, you're the nest. You're the wasp, Jack. It's you. You're the wasp. Your son is sticking his hand into your net. That's a weird sentence.
And you're also the nest. And you're also the man sticking his hand into the nest.
You're all of it, you piece of shit.
I mean, I was joking when I said that, but it is kind of true. Like when you're like being self-destructive.
Yeah.
Is being both the wasp and the dude sticking his hand into the nest.
Stick your hand into your own nest. It's like we've been pretty harsh on Jack in this book, and I think it absolutely earned, especially knowing where the story's going like we do. It is tragic as well. Like that's the thing I love about the scene is you're angry at him, you're disappointed in him, you're horrified by him, but you're also just kind of really sad. It's just really sad. You do feel bad for him. I think that's the thing that King does really remarkably well is the, just again, another connection between Jack Torrance and Stephen King. I think King has real empathy for his villains. He does. Not the overarching evil ones like the hotel and like the Crimson King and stuff, but the people, connived and pushed and prodded into making the worst possible decision. I think he really feels for them. And we get that with Jack Torrance here. I think you feel for him. You feel bad for him. Like, it's sad that this is where it's going. It's tragic.
Yeah.
You're not, I don't know. You don't want it to go that way, and you can still hate him. I do. I hate him. He's gonna try to go murder his son. I don't like that person. But
yeah,
it's sad.
Yeah, well, it's the thing where, I mean, the reason why he's a great character is there's a lot of relatable stuff in there. There's a lot of the worst of all of us in him that we can't help but relate to and recognize. And so even when we hate him, we're kind of really hating that part of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we want him to succeed. We want him to get over all that.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing and sad when he doesn't.
It is. All right, so we move on from here to chapter 48, Stapleton Airport, Denver. Our last chapter of the week is a pretty short one, and it sees Dick Halloran as his plane lands in Denver. This is when we are back with our horn-rimmed glasses woman, Matt, who once again is talking about the CIA. This is the line I was talking about earlier. How's your steel plate reacting to all this, if I might inquire? Talking about the rough landing and the blizzard that's in Denver. And he said, "Oh, my head's fine," Halloran said. "It's just my stomach that's a mite queasy." A shame. She reopened her book. I love this woman. I love her so much. She's so random and weird. I mean, do you have any, we already talked about this a little bit, but do you have any inclination of what King is doing with this character specifically?
I mean, since you asked, I think she's hitting on him. And the a shame is more like
that his stomach's queasy, so he can't bang her in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Really?
No, I was more imagining like she's talking to him to kind of get a repartee going, but it's not working, and so she's disappointed in him.
But I mean, we learn that she does have a little soupçon of shine. And so she's probably at least on some level like picking up on his extremely heightened emotional state. Like he's kind of, we didn't really talk about it specifically, but he's kind of just below panic throughout this entire flight because he's frantically trying to get there as fast as he can, and things consistently delay him on his way there. And so he's kind of freaking out about it generally. And she's probably picking up on some of those vibes a little bit. And so maybe she's just trying to understand or trying to fish for what the heck is going on with this random guy on an airplane.
Yeah, right. Or another thing that occurred to me is that because she has the shine, she's aware that he's not quite being honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he totally lied about there being a plate in his head. That is one funny thing about Dick is he lies pretty freely. Even like he didn't have to lie about there being a plate in his head. Like that seemed like a pretty elaborate, like almost comically unnecessary lie. So maybe she just knows that he's lying, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he did say that he felt a little bad about lying about that, right? But you're absolutely right that it just came to him so effortlessly. Like there's no moment of thought or hesitation when he does this. I mean, that kind of makes me think it's a lie he's told before, and like this is something he has a lot of practice in, of just, you know, when he's having some weird shining thing going on, he has like a go-to excuse to explain his weirdness to people in a way that gets them to totally understand, because, you know, being an injured war vet is a way to get people to immediately sympathize with you and probably stop asking you questions about why your behavior is weird.
That's true. I mean, the only other possibility that I thought of is that she's kind of giving him a hard time for being a wuss, because she doesn't seem to be reacting to the turbulence, and the fact that he is maybe like amusing to her.
Yeah, and there was another woman like screaming on the plane, and her only reaction to this woman is like, "Oh, calm down."
Yeah. I mean, I love that we've had this conversation about basically one sentence of her just saying a shame, because it is kind of a non sequitur. It's like, what's a shame? Why is it a shame? What do you mean? Am I? What are you saying? It's genius.
Well, see, if his steel plate was reacting to this, it would mean that the CIA is even more bad, and that would help her. Yeah.
Okay. I see.
So the rest of this chapter, Matt, we're not going to spend too much time on this. I think it is just, again, table setting. Dick rents a car and starts making his way to the Overlook, but the storm is getting worse, and he ends up having to take the long way around because a road is closed. And I love the end of the chapter is a radio message saying, "Don't drive in this. Go back in your house and stay there." And he gets really pissed off and shuts off the radio because he can't. But I mean, the kind of increasing frustration as it feels like the entire universe is stacking up to prevent him from getting there. And that's how we end our chapter.
Yeah, great. Really awesome stuff this week.
So I guess the question I have for you with this Halloran stuff specifically, because I think we talked extensively about the first chapter. I think we spent a lot of time on that chapter in relation to the other two Dick chapters, and I think it's just because there's a lot more, you know, thematically going on there. These two chapters really just feel like we just need to go through the steps of him getting there. It helps increase the tension. It helps like ask the question of like, is he going to get there on time? What's happening? So it's like these quick cutbacks of just tension raising to be like, oh, Dick, he's trying to get there. He's trying to get there. He's trying to get there. Like we're kind of like pacing frustratedly as we're waiting for him to get there. I mean, did they work on you? I know the first one definitely did, but did the other ones work on you?
I mean, I enjoyed them. I didn't have any issues with them. I kind of hear what you're saying, where it's like, we have to physically get Dick to the hotel and do it in a way where it doesn't feel rushed. And I would say they did work, actually, because we're sort of tactically cutting away from the Overlook and kind of allowing a little bit of time to pass. And in the meantime, things are getting worse, like really, really rapidly. And so that does ratchet up the level of tension. I think overall, I did like the choice. And I think counterfactually, if you didn't have these Dick approaching the hotel chapters, then it would feel weird and off pacing wise. Yeah,
I mean, it definitely would feel weird if we had like the one chapter and then the next time we see Dick is when he's strolling up to the Overlook.
Right.
That would feel a little bit weird. It'd feel like we need the connecting tissue there. And I think it's one of those things where like, as you're crafting a story, it's like, yeah, we need this both for pacing and for tension, but also just because you have to draw the dots. Like you can't just have one dot way over here, another dot way over here, and just draw a line. You need you need the ones in between. And I think the book recognized that. So I agree with you. I mean, not my favorite chapters. That's kind of why I think we rushed through them a little bit, because there was so much other stuff to talk about. But necessary, yes, I think
Yeah.
so.
I'm not saying this happened this way, but like you can imagine that King did try to just have Dick show up at the hotel, and then he did the thing where he was like, what happened was this, and then he like wrote everything that happened, and then he was like, I can't just dump this here. I need to spread this out and then have it be more organic.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right. Well, that is our reading for the week. We have finished chapter 45 and everything else. So we will move on from here. Next week, we'll be covering chapters 46 through 51. It will be the penultimate episode, Matt. We've only got 2 more weeks of actual chapters to discuss, and then we're done with this book. So
all right,
it's all gonna get it's gonna move very, very fast from here on out. I hope you're ready.
Well, I strategically got sick to try to stretch it out for everyone, but that's the most I can do. I'm sorry, I can't do any more.
I can't believe you waited an whole additional week before diving back into this.
I know. It's such a sacrifice.
All right, Matt, let's move on to our discussion question. Our question from 2 weeks ago is, mirrors are creepy and they can reveal a great amount of truth. What is your favorite use of a mirror in storytelling? Once again, the algorithm has selected 10, I believe it is, right? 10 answers for us.
Yeah, that's correct.
You know, some people don't believe the algorithm is a real thing and it's just a thing we made up, that you're just picking answers and you're just using that as an excuse. But I don't think you folks understand how little work we want to do.
Yeah, no, the algorithm is meant to save us from having to do work. If you think that I'm reading all of every single post and then carefully weighing the merits of them, that would be way more work for me. So no.
I just want you all to know that I am reading every single post.
I
tried
not
weighing the merits of them.
The weighing of the merit, that's the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah, all making decisions like that are really hard. Why do you think we still don't have any update on the Do the King thing rating content? It's because making these decisions is really hard.
It is. It's horrible. Why did we do that in the first place?
I don't know. We're folks, people keep asking us for an update on that. Here's your update if you've made it to this far in the show. We're so really sorry and we're working on it. I did make some progress on it last week, but it's just I'm kind of paralyzed by indecision, and so I'm doing what's the opposite of eating the frog? Releasing the frog, ET
keeping
styles.
The frog in your mouth, just keeping it there.
Just keeping it in your mouth.
Mouth frogging.
Oh, mouth frogging. That's definitely what we're doing. Well, it will happen. I promise you. Before we hit the 1 year mark, since the contest was announced, we will definitely get the final vote up and crown a winner. We are so very sorry.
It's a lot of reading. Okay. All right. Anyway,
it's not just that it's a lot of reading too. It's a lot of deciding.
It is. Yes. And it's not something we do often, right? So
no.
Yeah. All right. Baby, Can You Dig Your Sam says, the urban legend of Bloody Mary was definitely my first thought, but Pear Jane beat me to it. So instead, I'll mention a few others. For a creepy use of mirror, I have to go with the guy in Poltergeist who rips his face off while looking at himself in the mirror. Scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. I also have to give big old props to the bad Ash versus good Ash scene in Evil Dead 2, where the Ash in the mirror reaches through the mirror to attack our hero Ash. Classic Sam Raimi, classic Bruce Campbell, and just all around fun.
Man, mirrors really are creepy, aren't they? Jesus. They're so fun.
I need to rewatch Evil Dead. But yes, they are.
They're making a new Evil Dead. It's in an apartment this time.
Okay.
It looks actually really good based on the trailer. I'm kind of really excited for it. I don't think Sam Raimi is involved at all, but it looks very Raimi-esque in what they're doing.
Well, it could be fun. All right.
That's a great answer. Man, did you do Bloody Mary when you were a kid? I think probably everyone did. Kids do that anymore?
They do, actually. There was a whole thing with my daughter and her friend group where one of my daughter's friends told all of the friend group that she had done the Bloody Mary thing, and then Bloody Mary came out of the mirror and tried to strangle her. So
she lied.
She lied, right? That's the word for what she did. And I tried to explain this to my daughter, and it was a hard conversation because she didn't want to believe that her friend had lied. But I was like, this is a great opportunity to teach like Occam's razor. And some other concepts. So that was a whole thing. So yes, children still do that.
It's really fascinating, like transfer of information with this kind of stuff, because I don't remember who told me about the Bloody Mary thing, but surely someone told me, and someone must have told them. Like, so who was going around telling children about creepy mirrored
I
ladies?
I think I mean I don't know exactly, but I think it's probably like older sibling to younger sibling, older kid in school to younger kid in school, and it
Yeah,
just
it has to be,
passes.
but
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
think
It's
that's it.
wild. It's
Yeah,
wild. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, complicated 9519 says One Piece. There's one character that has an ability to pull through mirrors and into a mirror world. They don't exactly have control of this world, but they can use the world to jump through different mirrors, showing up at different locations in the real world. This might have a finite space of mirrors, though, depending on the location. It's not seen if them jumping through the mirrors and showing up halfway across the world, but they can do so on a large island. Pretty overpowered ability if used right, I suppose, and an interesting use of mirrors. This is the pirate anime about
This is
pirates and treasure. They
yeah.
also have mirror
Everybody
jumping.
has powers. Also, it's an anime.
Okay. Okay.
It. I did it. We didn't get any Pact answers, but I have to just give a shout out to the idea of a similar thing in the story Pact, jumping
Yeah.
between mirrors to great horrific effect.
We have to have our daily 10 mentions of Wild Bow stories, an
There was
episode
a
quota.
lot of wild load this week, wasn't there?
There was. I feel bad for folks that haven't read that stuff, but
Well,
we spent like 4 years on it. We
yeah.
can't not talk about it.
It's good. We didn't
Yeah.
cover it like accidentally.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, Jerk Stabworthy says, I was expecting someone to mention Mike Flanagan's Oculus, considering the community here, but I guess I'm it. I watched it years ago, but lumped it into the glut of horror movies that seriously sucked at the time. When Dr. Sleep came out, I recognized Flanagan as the rightful heir of King's movie domain and went back to his back catalog. Oculus is a solid horror film and deserves to be recognized as such. The Mirror is like an unreliable narrator telling people their own twisted stories. What a nightmare. This is one of those movies where I'm like, I really want to watch it, but it sounds scary, so
It's pretty scary.
I don't really want to watch it, but I do.
Yeah. It's really good. I watched this movie before I even really understood who Mike Flanagan was. Like I think I watched it as just this is just a guy made a horror movie, and I heard it was kind of good, so I watched it. And I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't until Haunting of Hill House that I started paying attention to like who Mike Flanagan was as a creator, and then I was like, oh, he made that Oculus movie I really enjoyed. Oh, that makes sense. So yeah, a really, really effective use of mirrors in that as well. I need to rewatch that. We need to do a Mike Flanagan thing.
We do.
It's all Mike all the time.
I think we will. I think we're on the same page, honestly, and we're going to do it eventually.
Yep. Brambino 1996 says the only thing that comes to mind for me at the moment is mirrors in our modern idea of vampires, but at least that's a pretty good one. When we look into a mirror, we are experiencing ourselves as we are represented in the physical world. Whether your interpretation is a pleasant one or not relies on solely how you view yourself. Either way, the mirror shows you that you're there, you're occupying space, you're at the very least alive. When your reflection is taken, so is a piece of your humanity. It sets you apart from the rest of the world. No longer can you view yourself and make any kind of judgments, positive or negative. You have no reflection because there is no longer anything to reflect. You've become a shell, a creature with no soul. I love this idea. Eternally taken away from even the ability to know yourself. P.S. When I was a kid, I used to have a nightmare where my reflection would pull me into his creepy-ass mirror realm where I would be trapped. My reflection would take over my life, changing style, and I could always tell the mirror people knew I wasn't supposed to be there. Good times.
Oh my God. What a detailed and terrifying nightmare.
Yeah, I'm so sorry you had that. I mean, I get that. I get where that comes from, but yeah, that's terrifying. I think Brambino like just expertly like summed up why no reflection on vampires is such a cool little detail of their power set, I guess, for lack of a better phrase.
No, I mean, I never really thought about the lack of reflection in that level of depth. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
appreciate that. Did you ever read all of the Magician's books?
I did, yeah.
There was a creepy mirror thing in that kind of related to like this mirror realm concept. Yeah, anyway, just wanted to...
It was extremely creepy mirror
toss that in there.
Read Lev Grossman's The Magician books, everyone. Don't believe the summary that's just like Harry Potter, but for adults. That's not what it is. It's much better than that.
Yeah, that's like actively misleading, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I get why that's like good marketing because you've heard of Harry Potter, but
Yeah.
it's not good. It's not.
Also, the TV show really rules too, but for like entirely different reasons because it's like completely different and extremely horny. It's really fun though. I enjoyed the show.
Still haven't watched that. All right, Bookish Gardener says, not my favorite use, but the most recent thing I watched about mirrors was an episode of Adventure Time where BMO trades places with his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Football. I have to say I don't know what any of this stuff is. So
is the name of the bathroom mirror football?
I don't know.
Or is the world?
I think the him in the mirror. Okay, it's creepy because football's world consists of only the area that can be seen in the mirror, and BMO doesn't realize that until it's too late, and football won't trade back, just like Impact. I don't know why it just freaked me out that there was no more world. The shadow of the mirror was, the shadow in the mirror world was nothing, no light to turn on and a hallway to see, just a void. I also couldn't figure out if all this was just BMO being extra. Football starts smashing the mirror because it revealed something in him that he didn't want to see, dishonesty. Every reflection was a reminder that he had trapped his friend into his solitary and lonely former life. At the end of the episode, Football is looking into a pond and sees BMO. Football falls in and comes back out as BMO, with Football left as the reflection. Dark Tower spoilers ahead. Because everything serves the beam, of course. It reminds me of Roland's mind being split as BMO starts to show up in every reflection, constantly reminding Football that he backed out on the deal, just like thoughts of Jake always reminding Roland of what he did. And also reminds me of how Detta and Odetta never want to face each other. That's cool. I like that too.
I think it's cool that like people could just write their answer out and then replace random words with something else, and we would have no idea at all because I haven't seen a second of Adventure Time. I mean, I heard it's good, but no, that's really cool. I think it is interesting how many answers so far have captured the and then the mirror version switches place with you. Like this seems to be like a core fear at the heart of a lot of human beings. Of this idea of being replaced by your reflection.
Yeah, the idea of a mirror world is creepy.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just like look at myself in the eyes in the mirror, and that's enough to freak me out. I'm not even doing like a Bloody Mary thing. It's just a weird sensation.
Yeah. Burning Beard 138 says, first time, long time. Favorite use of mirror in storytelling has to be the cover of Black Flag's highly influential 1981 album, Damaged. The art depicts new vocalist Henry Rollins smashing his bloodied fist into a mirror, destroying his own reflection. As a vain culture, we love mirrors, but we also hate them for what they reveal about us. It's always tough to have things turned around on you, and in this particular case, it's a perfect expression of the self-loathing, and desperate rage that informs the songs on the album. It's a man who can't lash out at anyone else in his loneliness and attempts to annihilate himself. Try to get inside the song Damaged Eye and see if you don't feel like smashing up all of your mirrors. P.S. Happy birthday, Henry, 2/13/61. That would have been great if it wasn't 2 weeks ago when the question was.
Happy belated birthday, Henry Rollins.
Happy belated birthday, Henry Rollins.
We know you're out there. Henry Rollins is an interesting fictional character who happens to be a real person.
Please explain.
I don't know. I don't really listen to his music, but he's one of those people where like you learn about him and you're like, this isn't a real person. He's a punk musician from that era, from the founding era, and he has a really sort of strict code. People who actually know what they're talking about are probably screaming at me right now, but he just seems really interesting. He's an interesting cat. All right, next we have Jen Cat D. The obvious answer is Harry Potter's Mirror of Erised, but my reasoning is not as obvious. The mirror shows you your heart's truest desire. I am very good at lying to myself and have been for my entire life. Years of talk therapy have helped me come to terms with this. I'm at a point in my life now, at 45, where I feel content and satisfied. Or do I? What if I gaze into the mirror and see myself in a different career path, as a mother, as a volunteer world-traveling philanthropist? Am I really as happy as I think I am? Ugh, my brain hurts.
Oh, Jen, don't Look into that mirror.
Yeah.
It's a bad. The whole point of that mirror was it's a bad mirror.
Yeah.
It's not good. You can destroy yourself in front of that mirror.
I know. It seems like it was just a bad idea. It was a trap.
Yeah.
Dumbledore was not being kind when he showed Harry the mirror.
I still don't understand how he got the stone out of the mirror.
I can explain that to you.
Okay.
It's magic.
How do you make the mirror say, "Oh, it'll actually give you the stone, but only if you want to just have it and not use it"? That's a very it's just magic.
It's the kind of thing that Dumbledore
story.
That's the funny thing is like none of the magic that we actually see in the story can do stuff like that, but we just assume that Dumbledore can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, that's true.
Because he's Dumbledore.
I mean, especially in like the not metaphor, but in the overarching like rules of the world from a child's perspective is like, here's this all-powerful magician that can do anything and everything. Yeah. And part of the journey of that story is that Harry realizes that it's not true, and he doesn't actually, Dumbledore doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and he makes like 10,000 mistakes because he's actually terrible in a lot of ways too.
It's true.
Anyway, enough fucking Harry Potter. That's a great answer, though. The Mirror of Erised is actually a really cool and / horrifying idea. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Jake D says, my all-time favorite use of the mirror would be John Carpenter's 1987 classic Prince of Darkness, one of the craziest takes on biblical apocalypse horror, and a wordless acting credit for Alice Cooper. Sure, it's got its cheesy moments. What movie from the late 80s doesn't? Without spoiling too much, mirrors are used in the cinematography throughout the movie, and under the right conditions can open a portal to an alternate dimension, allowing demons to come through to our dimension. The final confrontation and use of mirrors in the climax of the movie is classic John Carpenter. It took 2 seconds after reading this discussion question before the penultimate scene's image popped into my head, and it's been a good 20 years since I've seen the movie. Time for a rewatch. Oh, I've never seen Prince of Darkness. I feel bad. I've seen almost all John Carpenter.
Huh. Never seen it either. I'm looking up pictures and it looks absolutely disturbing. So
yeah, we need to watch it.
Never even heard of it, to be honest.
I think I've heard of it because I was looking at Once Upon a Time, us doing a deconstructing series on Carpenter. And I think I decided maybe too many movies, but
yeah, looks pretty messed up. Cool.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah.
All right. Rear Admiral Bottom says the Hall of Mirrors / Funhouse scene from the climax of The Lady from Shanghai. It was originally 20 plus minutes of Orson Welles going nuts with editing and perspective, and his then wife Rita Hayworth vamping it up as the villainous femme fatale, all edited down to a bare 3 minutes thanks to studio notes. The original version has been lost to time. The edited version is available on YouTube. Cool.
That's pretty cool.
And then they provide the link if you are interested.
I've seen The Lady from Shanghai before. I did not know that there was a whole unedited, crazier version. Kind of jealous we never get to see that.
Yeah. I have not seen The Lady from Shanghai, so I don't really get the reference, but that sounds really interesting. Cool.
All right, our final question comes from, is this Matt? Is this really their name?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just a bunch of letters.
Yeah.
In the video game Celeste, mirrors are a recurring motif along the protagonist Madeline's climb of Celeste Mountain. The game is a metaphor for overcoming self-doubt and loving your true self, and mirrors are used to force reflection. The first introduction of Madeline, an antagonist character who is Madeline's personified insecurities, occurs when Madeline breaks through a mirror and escapes, chasing you through an abandoned city as you platform your way out of a lucid nightmare. The use of reflections continues throughout the game as Madeline traverses a temple of mirrors, gets lost in a cavern of reflective crystals, and much more. It's a great game that is connected with many people as they climb their own metaphorical mountains and learn to see themselves. Wonderful answer. Really, really great game that I love very much. I love the story, and I love the extremely tight, often frustrating platforming.
Delightful. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone, for your excellent answers. It was really, really great set of answers this week, including the ones that didn't get read on the show. But I enjoyed them all very much so.
Me too.
All right. We've already kind of revealed, Matt, the question for next week, but let's say it again for posterity. What is next week's discussion question?
Does Jack fall off the wagon without direct intervention from the Overlook? Why or why not?
Yeah, and you can go wherever you want with this. Like you can say yes, but not for a long time. No, never. Like just let us know. What do you think? And maybe as you're kind of crafting your answer, come up with like what does that say, or what does that hint toward what King is trying to say about addiction, and Jack specifically, because like I don't think Stephen King's thesis here is that it's super easy to stop being an alcoholic unless you go to a spooky ghost hotel. Then it's not so easy.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see people take positions like, Jack would never drink again if it weren't for the hotel, and then defend that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's kind of the impetus of this question. Is I think in one of our Twitter posts a few weeks ago, we kind of talked about how we were posing this question of Jack's agency and not, and we got a response that was basically someone saying like, without the hotel, Jack would have spent the winter happy with his family, just living it up, enjoying life. Everything would have been perfectly fine. And I was like, oh, I think I kind of disagree with that, but it's an interesting line of thought for sure. So we want to poll the audience and see what everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for us here this week. Next week, The Shining continues with the penultimate episode covering chapters 46 through 51. Oh man, we're getting there, Matt. I'm looking at my book right now, and there's just a very little tiny bit of this book left. I think both the next 2 weeks are only 60 pages, so they're both going to be shorter sections.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the subreddit at r/doofmedia is probably the best place to get in touch.
Absolutely. And make sure you're subscribed, folks. We're coming up on the end of The Shining, and then we're moving into Night Shift, the short story collection, which is going to be a change for us, Matt. In a few weeks, we're going to be talking about short stories, which is going to be a little bit of a different format for us. So we'll see how that goes. But you don't want to miss a bit of it, so make sure you subscribe.
Yeah, I love short stories. And if you like our show and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account at patreon.com/doofmedia. Special thanks to new patrons this week: Donna L., Christina P., Jacob K., Stephen F., and Amanda D. I guess that was probably the last 2 weeks of patrons. But yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. It really means a lot.
Yeah, especially for all of those of you that supported in the week that we took off. We really appreciate that. So even if we didn't release an episode, we still got some support, and that means the world to us. Thank you. Because we do really feel bad when we have to change the schedule around. We try not to, but Matt literally could not speak, so that just wouldn't have been a very good show.
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, you said it.
If you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. You can continue to help us out in all those amazing ways that you still do, sharing the podcast, and of course, leaving a rating and a review on whatever podcatcher you use. This week's Spotlight review comes from user Hater of Swag, who gives us 5 stars and says, yes, is good. Quite, actually. That is short and sweet and to the point.
Perfectly adequate. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hater of Swag.
Hates swag, likes us.
Yep.
Would you like some swag? Some Kingslinger swag? We did have a question on the subreddit the other day, Matt, about merch, and we are working on that.
Yeah.
Some would say we've been working on that for a year, but it wouldn't be me, because that would admit to my own failings as a person.
Some would say we've been working on that for like 4 years, and you could say a similar thing about me in that case. But anyway, we're working on it.
We have plans to actually expedite that process soon. So hopefully, yes, we will have swag for you, Hater of Swag, and for other people. It was nice to see the interest in having things, having merch, because, I think one of the things that kind of prevented us from just pulling the trigger on it was the idea that like, oh, we're going to do all this work and build this stuff up, and nobody's gonna buy anything, and that'll make us feel bad about ourselves. So it's good to see that there is some interest there for sure.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. We will be back next week for more Shining. It's popping off, y'all. It's gonna be crazy. We'll see you next week. Long days and pleasant nights,
and may you have twice the number.